G'day, g'day. Isn't it great to be an Aussie? G'day, g'day. Reading a terrific book. Betrayals, the unpredictability of human relationships. That no one can force someone to feel betrayed against his will. That it is quite possible to manipulate someone into feeling betrayed, even in the absence of a genuine betrayal. As is the case with Iago and Othello. Iago states, "I'll pour this pestilence into his ear." Just a few elusive words and the perception of betrayal is constructed. From that moment on, Othello feels himself betrayed and no one can persuade him otherwise. Little or nothing has gone into constructing that perception, but demolishing it proves impossible. So you cannot have human relationships without the possibility of the feeling of betrayal. Kind of stalks you everywhere you go when you have other people in your life. If you make an appointment with someone for 9 a.m. and you've got a busy schedule, you've got everything locked in, and then they don't show up till 9:30, you're probably going to feel a little bit of betrayal, right? And all human relationships are unpredictable. We never fully know somebody else, and people change. So the proofs of supposed betrayal, be they genuine or false, take on the look of truth precisely because every gesture and every word is interpreted through the perception of being betrayed. So if the most powerful experiences of your childhood is feeling betrayed, then you're going to take that suspicion into all of your relationships and then massively increase your chances of experiencing betrayal because you look at things through that prism that you've constantly been betrayed, so you're just expecting it to happen again, and thereby you're more likely to bring it about. It is impossible to prove faithfulness or loyalty. Impossible. So I've been a blogger since 1997. I've often blogged about my personal life, so some people are just paranoid that I might blog about them. And once they get that idea into their head, there's nothing that I can say or do. There's no faithfulness and loyalty proof that I can ever offer to assuage that nagging doubt on their part. So I found it's best not even to try. Just, okay, that's your feeling, I accept it. You can't prove faithfulness, loyalty. Well, on the other hand, it is always possible to find or construct proofs of infidelity or betrayal. Belief is a conviction that is based less on proof than on the absence of contradictory proof. To prove faithfulness, loyalty, filial love, or friendly affection would require confirmation of everyday reality. It would involve proving something that normally has no need of proof. For that reason, there are no instruments, no ways of proving faithfulness or loyalty. Anything, the use of a particular expression, a tone of voice, a glance, can be interpreted as an expression of abandonment and a confirmation of supposed betrayal. Love Los Angeles in the morning. It's so fresh and clean out. Beautiful day. NFL season about to start. To perceive an action, a gesture, or a statement as a betrayal induces the hearer to reinterpret, hence to recast, the entire past of the relationship in the light of that betrayal. So you can have this wonderful relationship, but then in the end you decide to break up with a girl, she would then reinterpret everything that you guys have experienced in the light of that betrayal. What has occurred, although it is part of a history in a relationship, becomes attributed to the perfidy and the ill will of the betrayer, to the ingenuousness of the betrayed. Hence, it is seen as the act of just one person. Can we speak of betrayal if the person betrayed is never aware of it? Certainly not. If betrayal is based uniquely in awareness. So this is what Shakespeare states through Othello. He that is robbed, not wanting what is stolen, let him not know, and he is not robbed at all. Okay, we're on page 20 of this excellent book, Betrayals, the Unpredictability of Human Relationships by Gabriella Turnaturi. If we regard betrayal as a form of relationship, we cannot deny that even if only one of the subjects is aware of it, the betrayal nevertheless changes both the relationship and the individuals. The betrayal is there, it encompasses the relationship, even if it is perceived and experienced as such only by the person who violates an implicit or explicit pact. That is, by the person who shatters the relationship of trust. Although the betrayed party, an individual or group, is still unaware of the betrayal, but does not attempt to perceive it as such. The one doing the betraying either attempts to distract attention by assuming an attitude of greater secrecy or defensiveness, or else tries to hide a sense of guilt behind an aggressive stance. The betrayer's behavior toward the other changes, which creates a change in the betrayed as well and modifies the relationship. So betrayal always takes place in the context of a relationship. You can't feel betrayed by a stranger. All it takes to introduce a change in the relationship is for one of the parties to that relationship to name and acknowledge the betrayal, even if only internally. Conversely, one can feel betrayed even if the other or others do not perceive themselves as betrayers. So it's an entirely subjective feeling. There's no objective test for betrayal. It's just something that you feel or don't feel. The betrayer can feel trapped consciously or unconsciously by contradictions inherent in the human mind, deceiving himself and imagining himself only to be loyal and faithful. Betrayal is perceived only by the betrayed, but will nonetheless leave its mark on the relationship. Once the other is perceived as a betrayer, even without explicit accusations and proofs or admissions, the relationship necessarily changes. One of the subjects can change, slowly or suddenly, modifying his ways of thinking about himself or about the Jews, of narrating his views and of not relating only to the other but to the world at large. Anyone who is undergoing phases of change tends to eliminate routines and habits that had become rules of behavior, and he thereby abandons the universe of shared meaning. So when I change the format of this show, loyal viewers will undoubtedly feel a sense of betrayal. Welcome to Beverly Hills, guys. The fact of the change appears to the other as a betrayal because it erodes all reliance on what had been certain, or mutual understanding within the universe of the habitual. The person who changes becomes unpredictable, even unrecognizable for the other. Yeah, so when the Kaufman's critique came along, other people on the show were just gobsmacked that I accepted this and changed, it seemed to them, on a 180. And everything that we held in common, all our routines of thought, were blown up. And I became unrecognizable to the other people who I'd regularly streamed with for years. Change, moving away from routine, is perceived as a form of abandonment. You change your life. Other people who are used to the habitual ways you do things are going to feel abandoned and betrayed. As if the changed person had chosen a route leading outside the we, leaving the we by the wayside. This change is experienced as a betrayal, not only within a pair connected by love or friendship, but also by a group or community that finds it difficult to accept that one of its members might adopt new parameters of judgment. So, let's say every morning you go to a Talmud class at 7 a.m. at Shul A, and then let's say your work schedule changes, so it's now more convenient for you to attend Daf Yomi, the morning Talmud class at, say, 6 a.m., which may require a different synagogue. So you start going to the 6 a.m. class with a different synagogue, different rabbi, and the people in your original 7 a.m. class are going to feel betrayed. Like, what? Why is he leaving us for that other synagogue, that other rabbi, that other class? What did we do wrong? This change is experienced as a betrayal. Every change is perceived as a threat to the status quo and brings with it the suspicion of a possible betrayal. Every betrayal is an unexpected break that subverts implicit or explicit rules. To people, form expectations of us, and because people only have so much time to think, they're not going to spend all day thinking about us. They just have certain expectations. Certain fairly simple expectations, then if we violate them, there's a very strong possibility that they will feel betrayed because you have changed outside of what they expected. I don't recognize you anymore is the accusation most often thrown at the presumed betrayer, irrespective of his intentions or concrete acts. Okay, I'm back. What happened? Oi. Beverly Hills, Wilshire Boulevard. Ain't it grand, folks? Hang on. Okay. Just 1 minute. Okay, that's all there is. Okay, we're back. Wilshire Boulevard, Beverly Hills. Love that morning light. Okay, I don't recognize you anymore is the accusation most often thrown at the presumed betrayer, irrespective of his intentions or concrete acts. Any change comes to be equated with betrayal, even though we all change something of ourselves in the ongoing process of everyday life. So, because we are often changing, it's inevitable that other people are going to feel betrayed at times. Any change comes to be equated with betrayal, even though we all change something of ourselves in the ongoing process of everyday life and the construction of our own identity and our relations with others, just as we tend to conserve certain other things. So all relationships contain the possibility of betrayal. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of human condition springs from the utterly unrationalizable and constantly shifting mixture of the stable and variable elements of our nature. The individual continually moves in new directions in an incessant exploration of the self and the world. This is why he can occasionally drift away not only from relations that seem destined to last forever, but also from parts of the self that are no longer considered meaningful or that are changing. In doing so, these new interests turn us away from earlier conditions with a sort of unfaithfulness, which is neither quite innocent, since there exist some bonds which must now be broken, nor quite guilty, since we are no longer the persons we were when we entered the relationship. The subject to whom the unfaithfulness could be imputed has disappeared. Often the shift within an individual from oneself to another is perceived as betrayal. So when I converted to Judaism, people from my Christian upbringing frequently experienced it as a betrayal. They no longer recognized me. When I changed the topics that I'd blog about every day, my loyal readers often experienced it as a betrayal. If I changed my approach to topics, my loyal readers would often experience it as a betrayal. If I changed my synagogue, people at the old synagogue may experience it as a form of betrayal. If I change my girlfriends, my ex-girlfriend might experience it as a form of betrayal. If I leave one job for another job, my old job employer might experience it as a betrayal. So, the individual continually moves in new directions in an incessant exploration of the self and of the world. This is why you can occasionally drift away not only from relations that seem destined to last forever, but also from parts of the self that are no longer considered meaningful or that are changing. So I could have a morning routine of yoga and then switch instead to 12-step meeting, and the people that I used to see regularly at yoga may experience that change as a form of betrayal. Often the shift within an individual from oneself to another is perceived as betrayal. The betrayer's fault is to have become different and to be moving forward alone rather than in synchrony with the other. Only when change in the other is accepted and welcomed as a challenge to redefine oneself and redefine the relationship is change not perceived as betrayal. But for that to be possible, the one who has changed must not hide the fact, but rather involve the others in the change. Betrayal is asymmetrical. Betrayal is the locus of asymmetry between our expectations and reality, between the image we have of the other and the other, between our sensibility and the knowledge that the other has of us, between our reading of gestures and words and what those gestures and words were intended to communicate, between the rules implicit in a certain interaction and the breaking of those rules, between moving along and staying put, between the one who changes and the one who refuses to change, between attention and inattention. Which one has moved outside the relationship? Which one has changed, or which one has stopped following the other's development? It's no longer really paying attention. So this is the book. When that happens, is the betrayal not perhaps reciprocal in the sense of mutual abandonment of the relationship? Reciprocity is annulled by an asymmetry in the two parties' perception of the betrayal, and also an asymmetry between the fast pace of change on one side and a slowness to focus on that change on the other. So betrayal is asymmetrical, right? When someone leaves you to have a relationship with someone else, you're going to feel betrayed. The other person's just excited about their new direction. Oh, I love all these palm trees, bro. Love all these palm trees. Beautiful Beverly Hills. In betrayals, the timing is never well synchronized. For the person who is aware of betraying, time can seem extremely long, and often he deliberately accelerates, putting an end to what seemed like an endless process. For the person who discovers that he is betrayed, everything happens in an instant, right? We get the perception that we've been betrayed in, boom, just an instant. So these are the types of things that get said in such instances. Why didn't you tell me right away? How could you have hidden a secret for so long? Why are you telling me this only now? The betrayed almost always says or thinks these things. They express the hurt inflicted not only by the betrayal itself, but by an awareness of time expropriated, time stolen, time removed from common experience, time of which the betrayed was unaware that you were changing. Yep, when you change, other people to whom you are significant are very likely to regard that change as betrayal. The one who betrays has a different perception of time, tends to isolate the betrayal, setting it apart as an interruption, the rupture of a continuity that can always be picked up again. The betrayer often asks in good faith, what does one betrayal mean in comparison with a lifetime together founded on loyalty and fidelity? For him, the time of the betrayal is not part of shared time, but rather belongs to a parallel time that cannot be measured. Harold Pinter's play Betrayal, the play in which all the characters betray one another. The only thing that seems to count morally and emotionally for the various characters is how long the reciprocal betrayals are being kept secret and how long they have gone on. The hurt seems to be inflicted not by a betrayal of ties of love or friendship, but rather by a protracted time period filled with secret gestures, furtive acts, and unsaid words. So, in the instant we experience betrayal, we then tend to reinterpret everything that's gone before in the relationship. The time thought to have been centered on a common we, to have been imbued with shared meaning and common acts, suddenly appears meaningless and not subject to measurement, filled with unknown acts that occurred at undetermined moments. The person betrayed can no longer reconstruct the time they had spent together because there were moments that he did not participate in the experience. We're going deeper and deeper into Beverly Hills, guys. The temporal sequence of those acts no longer coincides with the betrayer's time. Betrayal, time appears to be at once too long and too short. For the one who has been betrayed, the other has lived a double life of infinite reverberations. One a time of presence and the other a time of absence. Here's the book. This is what is meant by the expression to live a double life. Refers to this double time, one time of being fully present or not, of being here but also being elsewhere. The one who betrays with a magician's sleight of hand makes all the time supposedly lived together suddenly disappear. And the betrayed is left cheated of that shared time. This explains the sense of loss. Not only I don't know what I'm doing here anymore, but also I don't even know where I was then. Finally, the passage of time can mitigate the effects of the betrayal and its importance for both the betrayer and the betrayed. Any individual defines and evaluates betrayal differently according to the context in which it arrives, the life phase he is going through. Something held to be an unpardonable betrayal can come to be seen as merely a stupid deceit or a necessary rite of passage. What had seemed unjustifiable can be revisited with greater tolerance. Betrayals that in one phase of our lives would have seemed to us unworthy and execrable can seem almost innocent in another phase of our life. So that's alluding to the old saying, time heals all wounds. The passage from adolescence to adulthood, for example, often brings with it a different attitude toward an evaluation of betrayal. Adolescents cannot think of themselves, either in the present or future adult life, as betrayed or betrayers, because identity is constructed through relations with others, hence through trust. Adolescents unfailingly condemn betrayal, which seems to them not only a threat to a fundamental ethical order, in which actions and judgments are inscribed, but also a serious threat of abandonment. In adolescence, we demand an absolute loyalty and total faithfulness. Precisely because the adolescent identity is still fragile, feeling oneself part of a we is fundamental self-affirmation. Adolescents are emotionally more exposed to feeling themselves betrayed. So remember that, I think, 1986 movie, Stand By Me? So at the end of the movie, the writer says, I've never again had friends like I had in 8th grade. Does anyone? So our peers, our friends are more important to us between the ages of about 11 to 25. And then after 25, if you're a normal person, your family that you build becomes more important. Okay, where are we? Oh, we're on Robertson. Here we go, guys. Okay, this is a very classy street. Every promise unfulfilled, every secret disclosed is experienced as an enduring wound. When adults who have been trusted or unconditionally admired fail to live up to ideal expectations, the adolescent feels profoundly betrayed and abandoned. Life for this big city. It's only about 65 degrees here in Los Angeles. We're heading for a high of 80 degrees today. It's the first full Sunday of NFL Sunday, so I'm going to get home and subscribe to NFL Red Zone on my Sling cable TV subscription. Cowboys play the Giants at 1:25 today. With greater maturity, these betrayals will be evaluated differently, and unless they become fixed in the young person's awareness as traumatic events, they will be seen as necessary to growth and the formation of personal autonomy. Primal trust, the trust established in the first months of life, can be undermined by an excess of frustration, but also by an excess of gratification. It leaves no room for the child to learn to trust himself. The child who is never disappointed will not learn to tolerate waiting, a quality necessary in every trust-based relationship. So I wonder what celebrities we'll see here on Robertson Boulevard this morning. Man, I got to develop my own line of products like Alex Jones, like male vitality enhancer. Early trust must be shattered if relations are to evolve, and that a crisis or rupture characterized by betrayal is necessary if the individual is to learn to distinguish between the self and the other, hence to both trust and mistrust. Learning to trust, learning that we can be betrayed, are part of the formation of the individual. The experience of betrayal thus enters into the socialization process. It's a necessary part of growing up. It aids loss of innocence and leads to understanding that we are all exposed not only to the risk of being betrayed, but also to the possibility of becoming betrayers. Betrayals, great and small, appear as betrayals only years later and only in a phase of identity redefinition. Acts that had seemed insignificant come to be reinterpreted in light of sufferings undergone or inflicted on others, and through a richer store of experience and self-narration, they suddenly appear as betrayals. Betrayers and betrayed thus become so, not only in respect to the other, also in respect to the various narratives of the self that everyone constructs in different phases of life. Yeah, Thoreau used to say, I cannot live if I don't walk 4 hours a day, or walk 2 hours a day, read 4 hours a day. Who knew that you could accomplish both with one stone? Absolutely, and stream. So accomplishing 3 things: getting in my morning walk, reading a book, and I'm live streaming. Life is good. In literature and in history, from Judas to our own day, there are no positive figures of traitors or betrayers, except for Flavius Josephus, who is credited with using betrayal for good ends. Josephus remains a controversial figure among Jews to this day. Jews who think about Josephus seem to split approximately 50-50 on how they think about him. Josephus was in charge of small army fighting the Romans around year 66 of the Common Era, and he just gave up and he and his group just surrendered to the Romans, and he was granted his life, and he was granted permission to write, and so he wrote his Histories of the Jews about 2,000 years ago. So it's one of our sources of information about what life was like in Judea and the history of the Jews from 2,000 years ago. Needless to say, he did not have a PhD from a prestigious institution. Okay, here are the coppers. So, how do I get around this? Shakespeare portrays Richard III not only as ill-intentioned and cruel, but also as a monstrous and deformed person, not to be trusted and marked by nature with the sign of the betrayer. Even psychoanalysis tends to treat betrayal as a pathology, supporting a widespread notion that some personalities are more inclined to treachery than others. Leaving New York's never easy. Really into that REM song these days. Betrayal is presented in psychoanalysis as deriving from events in a person's past or from defective socialization. It is a symptom of a disturbed personality. As a symptom of disturbance, it can be treated, mitigated, and avoided. It is paradoxical that psychoanalysis, which arose as a science of ambivalence and the unspoken. Okay, here we go, guys. Get in a little cardio in the morning. Nothing like cardio in the morning. We're on Wilshire and Robertson Boulevards. And which a century ago shattered the myth of a transparent self-awareness should take refuge in pathology where betrayal is concerned. Although it is true that betrayal can take on pathological forms and be manifested in some individuals as a compulsion, something they cannot help doing repeatedly, to consider it uniquely as a psychological disturbance makes the thousand small everyday betrayals in which we are all now the betrayed and now the betrayer completely incomprehensible. So there was this Holocaust survivor who was haunted by nightmares every night, and he was a famous writer in Israel. And around 1970, he heard of a psychiatrist who was treating this kind of trauma in Holland. So he went to Holland, met with a psychiatrist who prescribed him LSD. So the Holocaust survivor took the LSD, and he had this stunning realization that in one context, he would be the concentration camp victim and the Germans would be the guards. But in a different context, say vis-a-vis the Palestinians, he would be the concentration camp guard and others would be the victims. See, none of us are immutably marked out by the rule of heaven to be victims or victimizers. Some contexts, all of us could be concentration camp victims, and in other contexts, all of us could be the equivalent of concentration camp guards. To consider betrayal uniquely as a psychological disturbance makes the thousand small everyday betrayals in which we are all now the betrayed and the betrayer completely incomprehensible. To treat betrayal as a symptom in a disturbed or suffering personality reduces it to the act itself, to one person's choice, and removes it from the relational dimension. All betrayals take place within a relationship. You cannot be betrayed by a stranger. You cannot be betrayed by someone who means nothing to you. You can only be betrayed by someone who you value. If you don't value someone, there is no possibility of betrayal. So, pathologizing betrayal denies betrayal as a product of relationships. Now, some scholars will call betrayal an ordinary vice, but it's one of the most common acts in everyday life. Robert and Joyce Hogan show how traitors and imposters are almost always people with admirable characteristics: intelligence, social poise, self-confidence, charisma, and charm. Although the Hogans do not adopt the idea that traitors are necessarily deviants, they nonetheless attempt to define the capacity and the desire to betray and limit those to a few personality types. But we all betray. As long as we're in relationships, we will inevitably at times leave others feeling betrayed. Feeling of betrayal is entirely subjective. Does Luke ever take a day off? Yes, I take the Sabbath off, mate. So, betrayal is a hyperbolic word. Here we are at the old Horace Mann school. Betrayal is a hyperbolic word that we use when other people have different priorities than what we expected. As we can never fully know someone else, we will always feel betrayed. At times. The more relationships you have, the more people will betray you and you will betray others. The more you care about others, the more vulnerable you will be to feeling betrayed. The more others care about you, the more vulnerable they will be to feeling betrayed. Let's say I took a week off from streaming. Perhaps some of my loyal viewers would feel betrayed, feel let down. Like, what the heck? What the heck, guys? Using psychoanalysis, psychology, or sociology to trace constants typical of the figure of the betrayer or the traitor still reflects the need to think of betrayal as something that can be circumscribed and predicted, hence to think of a propensity to betrayal as something that can be diagnosed, subjected to treatment, or avoided. No such luck. We're all locked in an iron cage together, guys. There's no escape. There's no escape from feeling betrayed at times. There's no escape from leaving other people feeling betrayed. Ah, beautiful sunshine. Social sciences, much like literary narratives, end up exercising betrayal by describing and delineating the figures and the personalities of betrayers. The figure of the betrayer can be constructed, so can its mirror. So if you have high expectations for the people, you're going to constantly feel betrayed. I remember Dennis Prager used to say on the radio that he never once had felt betrayed. And then around 1998, he said that only one person had ever betrayed him. Wonder who that was. And then about 12 years later, he said only 2 people had ever betrayed him. So these people whom he had befriended, and then he'd felt let down. Remember, there was one guy who was the first to tape Dennis Prager's nationally syndicated radio show and prepare these tapes for sale. And he ended up suing Dennis Prager for breach of contract, something like that. Got the details on my Dennis Prager biography on my lukeford.net website. Person betrayed is described and classified as having a weak personality and as ingenuous, excessively trusting, or overly generous. So, yeah, some personality types are much more likely to feel betrayed. So I think the amount of times that you feel betrayed is an indicator of how much in reality you live, of how mature you are. If you're constantly feeling betrayed, so you have excessive expectations for others, and you're not living in reality. Reality means we can never know other people fully, and accepting that we can never control other people's choices, and that often their priorities will be different from what we expect. So, I remember I took off work early one day to go to a movie with a friend. So I gave up like 2 or 3 hours of work, which would have meant $100 or so of income for me to go to a movie with a friend. When I got home, got a message from my friend that something had come up and he couldn't make it. So I was annoyed. And but my friend had other priorities. Maybe he had a pressing work obligation, or he needed to take care of someone in his family, or there are all sorts of things that can come up. So as a single person, I found it's often hard to make plans with married people because, I have to pick up the kids, or my wife's sick, I have to look after the kids. Like, that plans are much more liable to change than when you make plans with a single person. Also, it's often hard if you're over at their home to carry on a conversation because their kids will constantly interrupt you or barge into the conversation. So once a person gets married with kids, it's much harder to have uninterrupted conversations or to make plans with the person, because now they have other priorities, right? Their family normally, typically, will come first. And so all your well-laid plans are very likely to dissolve. Even this description is oriented toward exercising fear of betrayal because it leads us to think that all we need is wisdom, acuity, intelligence, and a proper balance between trust and distrust to avoid being betrayed. Well, if you care about people, you have relationships, and you make plans, people, even if you're highly selective and sagacious, you're going to end up feeling betrayed. The concept of betrayal as the product of individual will is in fact much more tranquilizing than its contrary. That is, that betrayal arises out of interaction. If you interact with others, you are going to feel betrayed. Betrayal arises out of the formation of relations in which the individuals involved do not always succeed to maintaining conscious and coherent control. To suppose that predetermined figures of the betrayed and the betrayer exist, that everyone can avoid betrayal through the exercise of will or by submitting to psychotherapy, is obviously more reassuring than the thought that we can all become betrayers or be betrayed according to our interactions and to the parts of ourselves that those interactions bring to light. But if betrayal is just as much an integral part of social life as loyalty is, why is it so feared? Why does it always bring such suffering? So the use of the word betrayed, like this very intense, hyperbolic expression of deep pain. Probably it is the relational nature of betrayal that makes it so feared. Always and in all circumstances, betrayal involves the rupture of a pact, the negation of the principle of cohesion, and a threat to the possibility of all relations. Whether one betrays another individual or a community, the act implies breaking some form of social bond. Above all, and on the symbolic level, it negates the principle of cohesion on which ties, bonds, and loyalties rest. Precisely because betrayal threatens the survival of the relationship or of the group, betrayal is the threat to the social order most to be feared. It is the most significant social symbolic break. To be betrayed by someone awakens the fear of also being betrayed by others, if not by everyone. When a we is shattered, we fear that every other we of which we are a part might collapse. Uncertainty takes the place of all previous security, and everything seems fragile, precarious, and illusory. Betrayal is a traumatic experience that destabilizes identity because it throws into crisis with interpersonal trust and trust in oneself. Betrayal is the most loaded with emotions of all subjects. Only love, which often accompanies it, has the same complexity and emotional force as betrayal. You really have to love someone to feel betrayed by them. If you're indifferent to someone, they cannot betray you. Betrayals, from the most trivial to the most grave, inevitably bring in their train a web of emotions that affect the betrayer and the betrayed equal measure. Betrayal. The narratives of betrayal owe their emotional impact to our perverse fascination. Betrayal always catches all parties of it unaware, even when it is deliberate. Betrayal always finds us vulnerable. It bears our fragility and our dependence, even within our proclaimed autonomy. We suddenly find ourselves at the mercy of others, deceived, mocked, defrauded of portions of our identity and of our life. The other has robbed us of trust. They have stranded us right in the middle of what had been a shared experience. Once we have been betrayed by friends, lovers, spouse, parents, or children, we can no longer pronounce the we. The we has been annihilated. It no longer exists. It makes no sense to refer to it. The I betrayed and the you betrayer remain irremediably dissociated and separate. confusion, a sense of lost moorings and solitude accompany the immediate awareness of abandonment. To be betrayed means to be abandoned. To be betrayed means to be abandoned. We are forced to erase the image of ourselves that we have constructed together with the other, the image of the other that we have created, and the image of ourselves as part of a shared experience. Betrayal is a devastating experience because it forces us to redefine ourselves. Hang on. Betrayal forces us to raise questions about the other person and about ourselves in combination with the other. Who are we now that we are alone and abandoned? How do we begin to tell our story, and where do we begin? Why have we been abandoned? I love that morning sun. Isn't that magnificent? For all the negative emotions that the annulment of the other can trigger. Anger, rage, resentment, scorn, hatred, resentment, betrayal always inevitably sets off negative emotions turned inward toward oneself. What have we done to deserve this death blow? That's what we think when we've been abandoned. What have we done to deserve this death blow? Okay, guys, we're walking through the slums of Beverly Hills, so I'm going to try to be alert, ready for any threat here. This is South Side Beverly Hills, man. Things can get dicey around here. To be betrayed denotes an immediate loss of self-esteem. We feel ourselves diminished, scorned, even guilty of having in some fashion done something to merit betrayal. We can slip into self-pity and depression. We soon develop an image of ourselves as a victim, incapable of discerning or understanding what goes on around us, as well as an image of the other as unfaithful and wicked. In accounts of women's reactions to betrayal in Love, one woman says, "I felt like a fool. I mean, if you're half smart, you're supposed to know something is wrong." Another states, "I wanted him dead. At least there is some dignity in being a widow." Third adds that she feels as if her life had been declared worthless. Everything that she had, everything she had believed in, suddenly meant nothing. Wandering around her house the previous night, she looked over 15 years of memories and shared history, pictures, photos, furniture that suddenly seemed to her rubbish waiting for a garage sale. The way these betrayed women tell their stories highlights how resentment toward the other is accompanied by a loss of self-esteem or sense of annihilation. So, resentment, that will destroy your life. And if you're feeling betrayed, you'll inevitably feel resentful. How do we deal with the resentment? So, first of all, you make a list of everybody that you resent, every institution, every individual. And just make that list in column 1. Hey, it's 8 a.m. here in Beverly Hills, so not many people are up and about 8 a.m. on a Sunday. So you just make a long list of everyone that you feel has betrayed you. Everybody that you resent. You just keep writing down all the names that you can think of. But really, you only need to do like the top 10 or the top 20 for your most powerful resentments, if you want to economize on time. Yeah, I got a flex bar in my back pocket, man. I'll whip it out should the need arise. Then in column 2, you write down, what did they do to you? Like, why do you resent them? Make a long list. Just work that list all the way down through everyone that you resent. You write down what they did, and that already begins to narrow your resentment. So now it's not the totality of the person that you resent. It's what they did. Then in column 3, you write about what did they affect. Like what part of your being? Was it your finances? Was it your social standing? Was it your self-esteem? Was it your social relations? Like, which part of your life did they affect most negatively? Then column 4 is the most challenging. What role did you play? All right, it may be nothing, or maybe 50%, or maybe 25%. What role did you play in this interaction that caused you to so resent this person? So for me, maybe I wasn't fully honest, wasn't fully open. I had undue expectations. So as we write out each column, we find our resentment starting to melt away. First, we narrow it from the individual to what they did. Then we narrow what they did to, why did it hurt us so much? What part of our life did it hurt? And then we look at our own role, which is incredibly humbling because we almost always play some role. It's like a slip and fall accident. Okay, you sue someone because you slipped and fell, like on an open pit on a sidewalk as you're walking through Beverly Hills. So let's say I slip and fall, and I sue Beverly Hills because they left like an open pit in the sidewalk that I slipped and fell into. Well, it's always comparative liability. If you slip and fall, you always played some role. You always have some responsibility in a slip and fall. Okay, so you may have 25% responsibility, 50%, 75%. Like I should have seen that hole in the sidewalk, even though I was live streaming and distracted. Well, that's on me. So all slip and fall cases are cases of comparative liability. Is the other party 50% at fault, 25% at fault, 60% at fault? Even if, let's say, they're 25% at fault, so most of the fault is on you, but still you suffered $250,000 in medical bills. It may still be economically a good idea to sue them because 25% of 250,000 is 62,500. So maybe a reasonable amount of coin. On the other hand, Tony Robbins says, don't file personal injury lawsuits. It's not worth it because it encourages the mindset of a victim. Because to maximize your economic return from personal injury lawsuit, you have to maximize the damage that the slip and fall did to your life. So you start thinking about all the ways you've been damaged. That, like, say you slipped and fell and you had a concussion, and that caused you to be impotent, and so you're adding to your lawsuit a cause of action, loss of relations with your spouse, and then it caused you to have headaches, and you got fired from your job. So you want to add on loss of earnings now to your claim, and then your economic return from a personal injury lawsuit will be largely based on how much you treated. So typically in a personal injury lawsuit, let's say the other person's 100% liable, then It's reasonable often to look for like 3 times your medical expenses as the ultimate settlement. So that gives you an incentive to treat more, because the more you treat, the more your medical expenses you'll have, and a lot of treaters will work with you on a lean basis. So if you get $10,000 worth of medical treatment for your slip and fall, then your case is worth potentially, say, $30,000. If you get $5,000, then your case is only worth about $15,000, and may not even be worth it for many personal injury law firms to handle. Well, resentments in life is like slip and fall. There's always comparative liability, right? You're never 100% innocent, or almost never. Right? You usually play some role in creating the situation that gave rise to your resentment. And then, when it comes to facing, okay, here's the parts of the interaction that weren't my fault, where I was the victim, so to speak. Then you have to look back on your own life and see, did I ever do anything as bad? And if I did other things that are as bad, do I want understanding and compassion from other people for all the bad things that I did? Yeah. So just as we want understanding and compassion for the bad things that we've done to others, so too other people deserve our compassion and understanding. And when you reach that level of understanding that there's really nothing that other people have done to you that's worse than what you've done to others, then it becomes much easier to extend them understanding and compassion, because you want understanding and compassion for yourself. Then when you complete that process, you'll find that almost all your resentment has just disappeared. All your conscious resentment has just gone away. And any resentment that remains, then you can just pray for the person. Pray that they have health, wealth, prosperity, ease, joy, all the things that you want for your life. If you pray for them, that they should have those things, then your resentment goes away. So let's say someone says something in the chat right now that triggers me and I hate them. Well, that's going to close me down from the path of prosperity. It's going to close me down to producing the high quality content that generates those super chats. So I don't want to close down that channel that can lead to prosperity and ease and joy. So it's important for me, if someone triggers me in the chat, to pray for the health, wealth, and prosperity and ease and joy and all the things that I want for myself. Pray that they should have those things. Then my resentment towards them starts to disappear, because you can't really pray for someone and resent them at the same time. And then my channels to quality content and prosperity have opened up again. So if you go through life filled with resentment, it's like you're blocked off from prosperity, from joy. Because all wealth or prosperity comes from relationships with other people. Resentment will cause you to act out in your addictions, whether it's drinking or drugging or using illicit material on the internet or numbing out to Netflix, or it leads to acting out. Resentment blocks you off from prosperity, because resentment blocks you off from having easy connection to other people. And all prosperity comes from other people, connecting with other people in some way. The more resentment you have, the less prosperity you'll have in your life. The less ease you'll have in your life, the less joy. By almost nonchalantly interrupting the routine of daily life and the tranquil flow of emotions, betrayal unhinges the self-image because it breaks off its narrative. Betrayal hurts us because we had this image of ourselves as like, oh, now I am Joe's friend, Joe's an important man. If I'm friends with Joe, that means I'm a good guy. Then Joe breaks off the friendship because you asked more of the friendship than it was able to deliver, and then your whole self-image has been shattered. So never ask more from a friendship than it's able to give, because you'll resent the person, they will resent you for asking more than what was appropriate for you to ask. There will be resentment on both sides, likely followed by betrayal and abandonment. Being betrayed is an experience that cannot be located within a temporal continuity. It is an interruption. Life comes to be related in light of that shattered continuity. There is a before the betrayal and an after it. This experience of life interrupted is accompanied by a perception of a shattered self that can tell its tale only in terms of the wound received and the break. Long after the event, anyone who has been in a betrayal, either as betrayer or betrayed, tells about it on the basis of this experience, seen as supremely significant and fundamental to the self. The paradox of betrayal is the fidelity which both betrayed and betrayer keep after the event to its bitterness. This creates negative emotions turned alternately toward the other and toward ourselves. We oscillate between a desire for revenge and accepting our own guilt. The anger and the rage unleashed by betrayal are emotions that somehow re-establish our self-respect and preserve our dignity. As a person betrayed redefines himself as someone who does not simply undergo an interaction, but rather controls it by passing from the role of victim to that of protagonist. The betrayed must work hard to pick up the thread of the narrative again and overcome the trauma of the interruption. This is only possible through an acknowledgement and acceptance of the betrayed self, not through denial. Reacting to betrayal by betraying, thus in turn denying all that had happened before, or by refusing to recognize oneself or the other, leads to an even more profound devastation of one's own identity because it involves self-betrayal. When we don't act in fidelity with our own values, with our own standards, we betray ourselves. Sometimes we'll be tempted to betray ourselves to maintain friendship. When someone speaks of the emotions connected with betrayal, we immediately think of the person who has been betrayed, almost as if the betrayer felt no emotions. Why is this so? Commonly shared image of the betrayer as ill-intentioned and cruel as someone who acts only on the basis of personal interest. Excludes the possibility that somebody might also betray simply because the very idea of betrayal elicits excitement and emotions. Bye-bye.